Moins bien, il faut qu'on s'en prenne à quelqu'un. Je crois. C'est vrai. Les Juifs, ils sont là parce que ça allait mal en Allemagne. Ils ont commencé à s'en prendre aux Juifs. Nous, ça va mal en France, on s'en prend aux Arabes. Voilà.
How did you learn about World War II?
Yeah, I think World War II was a tragedy that happened to the human beings, and we learned that since we were, like, in China, it was also a major battlefield during the World War II time.
Yeah.
And so we were educated since we were young, because in China the national television, they broadcast a lot of TV series about how Chinese people fight against the Japanese army. Yeah. So we kind of learned that just during our childhood.
Yeah.
And even when we went to school, like in elementary school and high school, the World War II is also a very important subject. It's
Yeah.
an area that we have to learn.
So did you learn a lot about it in history class?
Yeah, a
yeah.
lot. But
Okay.
it's mostly about the Asian
Asian side
battlefield.
of it.
Yeah, Asian side.
Yeah.
Like against the Japanese army.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you remember any of that?
The major difference between the Nuremberg and the Nuremberg trial and the Tokyo trial is that the Nuremberg, they provided sufficient. I think at least they provided the opportunity for the war criminals to defend them and to present the evidence, and yeah, and it's relatively fair compared with the Tokyo trial, because during the Tokyo trial, under the influence of American side, a lot of war criminals, they committed a lot of crimes during the World War II. They didn't get what they deserved. There's no the American side, they exempt a lot of war criminals because there are a lot of strategic issue behind that. So as a result, nowadays we can see that the German people, from that Nuremberg trial, they recognized a lot of mistakes they made, but not like the Japanese people. They do not really confess themselves, because that Tokyo trial didn't work well. I think.
Yeah. So they won't accept that their role in the war.
Yeah,
Okay.
They don't accept that the mistake they made.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. So just so about the Eichmann trial, they used lots of witnesses and emotive evidence in that trial. Do you think that's okay? Is it fair to do that, especially in a trial this big?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, there are very few evidence from the wartime, so we also have a lot of problems that even just in China, we cannot present too much evidence to convict the war criminals. So what we left the most are the witness, their what they saw and what they suffered. We only can find the source from their memory.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah, it's not a.
Do you think it makes it fair for the for the accused? Do you think it was fair for the?
I think if the evidence provided by the witness, they are coherent.
Yeah.
And not coherent and neutral.
Yeah.
And then it can be adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we're just going to talk about the American role in the war. So do you think that, imagine that Germany had won the war, would the US have been prosecuted for war crimes as well because of maybe some of their actions during the war in Japan, for example?
Yeah.
Do you think they would have been, and maybe do you think they should have been?
I think it's different because I heard that just during the Nuremberg trial, they sort of created a new criminal charge, like the anti-human crime,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it will be different because American side they didn't do such thing like that horrible. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So if the German won the war, maybe they only can send the American for other reasons, not like
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
reason in the Nuremberg trial. Yeah.
But maybe do you know the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombs? Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Japan.
Yeah, to Japan. Yeah. So do you think that was too far? That was too much, and maybe the US should have faced punishment for that?
I think at that time the U.S. side they were under a huge pressure from the Japan because the Japanese attacked the Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
That was outrageous for the U.S. side, and then I think it's a little bit too far for the Japanese because without any
warning
just throw out the 2 nuclear bombs.
Yeah. So it was probably too far, but because it was in time of war. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So you know the case of Roe v. Wade? No. It was the abortion case in America that legalized abortion. In America. So I suppose the question is I'm wondering, could you make the comparison that abortion is just killing people all the time? Millions of people are killed every year due to abortion, and what happened in the Holocaust was just millions of Jewish people were killed. So I'm wondering, do you see any correspondence between those two things?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I cannot just make a comparison between the abortion and the massacre. Yeah, because like fetus.
Fetus.
There are a lot of arguments about that whether fetus is human or not.
Yeah.
But based on my understanding, there are a lot of elements to constitute a human.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a good idea to compare. Just make the fetus as a human.
Yeah.
But we should consider more about the woman's right.
Yeah.
Like you cannot see. There are a lot of tragedy happened before, like they accidentally got pregnant. Yeah, but if they don't want the child, then their life will be very miserable.
Yeah.
It's
okay. Yeah, so it's not fair to make that comparison.
Yeah, it's not fair.
Okay. So there are some people, not many people, but some people in the world who deny the Holocaust. So they don't believe that the Holocaust ever happened. and then in Germany and in France, it's actually a crime if you deny the Holocaust.
Oh,
Yeah,
first time heard it.
yeah. So I only learned it recently as well. So do you think that that's right for it to be a crime, or do you think that everyone should have a freedom of expression to say what they want?
I think it's a problem of time. Like we just finished the war for how many years? 60.
Around 60, yeah.
60 years, and a lot of people still have trauma on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they criminalize it because for the consideration of the
Yeah,
victims.
exactly.
They are still victims, but I think in the future, the people should have more right of freedom of speech. It shouldn't
Okay.
be such a sensitive topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So so just in terms of the long-term effects of the Nuremberg trials, so for Germany, do you think it was a good thing for Germany that the Nuremberg trials happened? Did it maybe bring them, it brought, maybe because the Nuremberg trials happened, that the country could move on after that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, I think the trial is the only thing we can do to punish those criminals and to give a fair judgment, to let people recognize the history, let people to understand what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think the judgment will let the human being to better understand the equality among humans.
Yeah.
And to avoid the tragedy happen again.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Do you think maybe, say, if there's such war crimes were to happen again, that could a similar trial to the Nuremberg trial happen again, or would it not be fair to just go to another country and set up a trial there? And do you think it would be okay to do that again?
You mean under like the same tragedy happen again?
Well, yeah, or if a similar tragedy happened, maybe.
Yeah, I think there should be a standing court for this issue, because nowadays we still can see a lot of conflict in different areas. There are a lot of anti-human acts happening. So if all the crime they commit can receive the fair and opaque judgment,
yeah.
then that would be the right thing to do. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So a lot of the German high-ranking officials were executed after the Nuremberg trials. So do you think firstly, do you agree with the death penalty?
No, personally not. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that even though what these people did was so horrible, do you think that they deserve to be, well, not deserved, but do you think it was right that they were executed, or do you think they should have just received a life sentence maybe?
Yeah, I think even though they committed a huge crime, but in the future, I don't think it's right to punish people to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there was suggestion like proposed by the civilian, to let the war criminal to serve the hard work in the Siberia.
Yeah.
I think
In Siberia.
yeah.
Yeah,
Siberia, yeah. I think that is also probably it's a better punishment for them.
Yeah.
I don't think death penalty can solve every
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, one of the hard questions that we did in the class was, um, where does the blame end? Um, so, for example, the every time when they brought the Jews from the ghettos that they kept them in, and then they brought them on trains to Auschwitz and the different concentration camps.
Yeah.
So, for example, they just packed the trains with people, and people would die on the trains on the way there before they'd even got there. And they were cramped in, hungry, and no toilets or anything. So do you think, for example, that the train driver who drove that train every day, do you think did he deserve to be punished as well?
I don't think so, because I think the issue happened in Germany. It's different from in China, because I think at that time Germany was a quite advanced country, and they do things very organized and very systematic
Yes,
way. Yeah, and so people like they are very rational. They are reasonable person. They don't do things emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I think it's the problem of ideology and the system of the country. So, if a person was put on a position to do something bad, so it's not like it's not simply to say that he's right or wrong, because he's working under the instruction of the superior.
Yeah.
So
He's just doing his job.
Yeah, he's just doing his job.
Okay.
And I heard that even in the concentration camps, the German they let the Jews to regulate the Jews in the concentration camps.
Yeah.
Like, it was they chose a Jew to let other Jews to went into the gas room, right?
Yeah, so that was, for example, in the ghettos, they made a Jewish council.
Yeah.
And the council chose which Jews had to go on the trains to the concentration camp.
Yeah.
So do you think maybe if the people on the Jewish council, could they have done anything differently? Should they have said, no, I'm not going to pick people?
No, I don't think so. I don't think if this thing happen again, they cannot do the otherwise.
Yeah.
Thing, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you think they just had to do it because that was their job, and they.
Yeah, because now, in German people are quite logical and rational.
Yeah.
And not emotion.
Yeah.
So they just do the things they think is what they should do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's different from the Nanjing massacre, the tragedy happened in China.
Okay.
Because the Japanese, they don't want to let the Chinese people they don't want to kill all the Chinese people. They just kill people for fun. It's a savage thing. It's not like a human being.
No.
Yeah, but like things in Germany, they are doing things very reasonably. I can say that it's not like killing Jews for fun. They are doing that thing just for purpose.
Yeah. So you think it was a system that they had that.
Yes.
Yeah. So the people who were operating, the people at the top were evil, but you think the people who were in the system were just, that was their job and they just had to do that job?
Yes.
Okay.
They have no choice.
Yeah. Okay. So how how strong is patriotism in your country?
Very strong.
Very strong.
And actually, it became the strongest time after World War II. Yeah, because we went through the 80 years war against Japan, and people are, how can I say, their patriotic emotions is getting stronger because we stick together and fight against the Japanese.
Yeah.
And we realize we are the same ethnic, right?
Yeah, same ethnicity.
Same ethnic. Yeah, we should protect our land.
Yeah.
And so that's the time we become very
patriotic. Yeah. So you think the war actually had it made China more patriotic than it was before?
Yes, definitely.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Thank you very much.
That's all.
Yeah, that's all. Okay, so how did you learn about the Second World War?
I learned about the Second World War probably started in elementary school, and then in high school I took a history class that really focused on World War II and the Cold War.
Okay, so did you talk about it at home with your family or anything?
My grandpa, he fought during World War II. He was in the Navy, but I really don't know what he did, and we didn't talk about it that much.
Okay. So when you learned about it in school, was it taught in a positive or negative way? Like the United States' role in the war.
It was definitely taught in a positive way, especially because it was during the Great Depression, and World War II helped the United States economy leave the Great Depression. And even when we talked about dropping the nuclear bombs, at least in the way that my history teachers presented it, there was like no negative to it, like it ended the war.
Okay, cool. So do you know anything about the Nuremberg trials?
Honestly, I don't know too much about them. We might have briefly touched it during my class, but we didn't talk about it in depth.
Okay. I'll just tell you quickly. So it was the first Nuremberg trial took place in 1946. So there was a judge from the US, from Russia, from France, and from the UK, who presided. Those four judges presided over it. And the first trial was of the high-ranking officials in the National Socialist Party. So some of them were sentenced to death, and others just got jail sentences. And then after that there was the trial of the judges in the Nazi courts, and then later on there was another trial, but we'll talk about that after. So, do you think it was fair for these trials to just these people just to come to Germany and just host these trials? Do you think that was an okay thing to do, or should they have been maybe tried in America, or could anything have been done instead?
I don't really know how it could have been dealt with better, like if you could get like a non-biased country to be the judge for that. And I know that like the UK, the US, they were trying to figure out like what to do with Germany because it was destroyed and they didn't want them to regain power. So yeah, I would, from my limited knowledge, I think that that's probably the best they could have done. And I don't think like the UN or anything was created, but
no,
yeah.
So
there was no like world governing body who could have tried the judges and everyone in Germany. But yeah, and I don't know if doing the trials in Germany was maybe the best idea. I don't know.
Okay, So the Nuremberg trials were in 1946, and then in 1961 there was a trial of Adolf Eichmann. So Eichmann was a high-ranking SS officer, he was in charge of deporting the Jews to concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
So after the war ended, he fled to Argentina and lived there with his family. And then Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, captured him and brought him to Israel, where he was tried for war crimes in Israel. So the first question I have is that in the Nuremberg trials, people thought the Nuremberg trials were boring because they just used documentary evidence. So they just used documents from the National Socialist Party to prove what they'd done. But then in the Eichmann trial, they used lots of emotive evidence. So they got witnesses up on the stand, and witnesses collapsed on the stand and cried on the stand. And some people have said that it just sort of descended into legal theatre. So what do you think is a more effective way of trying it? And do you think it was right for them to get all those Holocaust survivors onto the stand? Do you think that was necessary, or?
I think, I don't know, it's tough because it was an awful, awful thing that they did, and like, I don't know how you could really, like, I guess if you really wanted to look at it objectively, maybe not having so many witnesses come to the stand, because, like, if it was documented what was happening to these people, just having somebody crying and not, I mean, they weren't being dramatic, like, they went through something awful. This is a difficult one. I don't know.
Do you think it was necessary then to have some witnesses, to have some survivors there?
No, probably not, because I don't know if it would have, if them being there was really going to make a difference, like, on his sentence, because he's definitely guilty. Like,
yeah, them,
like, do you know if the witnesses, like, had direct knowledge or, like, saw him doing it? Like,
some of them knew who he was, yeah, and I think so, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, all the evidence that you can gather about something would probably help, but maybe if it was like a balance between like documented evidence and witness accounts, I don't know if that's like a reasonable thing.
Okay, yeah.
That could have happened.
Okay, cool. It's working.
Yeah.
So people have said, some US soldiers and people high up in the US Army at that time said that if they had lost the war, that they would have been prosecuted for war crimes. So do you think that the US should have been prosecuted for war crimes, or would they have been?
I honestly don't have a huge background in, like, do you have an example of like what the war crimes would have been?
Dropping the
atomic
bomb.
Yeah, the atomic bomb. Yeah, okay, that's a big one. Yeah,
Or do you think the means justified the end, or the end justified? Would you think it was?
No, honestly, I don't think we should have dropped the bomb. I don't think that was the right course of action. And like, we haven't dropped one since. Like, we realized that that's not the right way to deal with like ending a war. But yeah, I mean, victors write history. So, I mean, and in my classes, I was taught in like kind of a negative or a positive light. Like, we didn't really go into whether or not
it was right or wrong.
Yeah, at least from what I can remember. Like, I don't remember having like a huge discussion on that.
So it's basically, that's type of, when taught in school, it's sort of that was the right thing to do, or that was the only option, was to drop the bomb.
Yeah, from what I can remember from learning in my classes. Yeah, I don't remember talking about like other solutions that the U.S. had.
Yeah. Okay. So, the case. Have you heard of the case of Roe v. Wade?
Mm-hmm.
The abortion case.
Yep.
So, Justice Blackmun was the judge who presided over that case, and do you think you can compare, maybe, who do you think is, there's an argument out there that Justice Blackmun has killed a lot of people since that judgment came in. So do you think maybe who killed more people, Justice Blackmun or Adolf Eichmann, or do you think that's a fair comparison to make?
It definitely depends on who you talk to, and whether or not you believe that life begins right at conception, or if it begins like when the baby is actually born. I don't think you can really compare the two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that's like a fair comparison for someone to answer, just because they're so. Well, it also, I mean, I guess you can talk to some people and they'll be like, abortion's murder, and that judge has killed millions and millions of babies. But if you talk to somebody who's pro-choice and thinks that women have the right to choose whether or not they want to abort their baby or not, or the fetus or not.
Do you have a personal opinion on that?
Yeah, I'm pro-choice.
Okay.
But, yeah, I don't know. And maybe it's because I just don't know too much about what was the guy's
Eichmann,
name?
Yeah,
like what his role was.
Mm.
But I just think that they're both in completely different worlds. But that's just my opinion. Like, if you talk to somebody else, it would definitely be different.
Yeah. Okay. So, how about, do you think, we discussed this in class as well, killer whales, the way that they're effectively just captured and kept in captivity and then exterminated.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jewish people were effectively captured and then kept in captivity and then exterminated. So, do you think killer whales are persons they should be? Is that a fair?
No, that's not fair at all. I am very like pro-environment. I studied environmental science in school, and like I don't think comparing animals to human life is ever like a logical comparison. I mean, I do think that like keeping killer whales in a small pool is wrong, but I don't think you can really compare that to like exterminating an entire group of people. I don't think that's a fair comparison.
Okay, yeah. That's fair enough. So, in Germany and France, it's a crime to deny that the Holocaust ever happened. There's a guy called David Irving from the UK, where it's not a crime to deny it, who says that there's no actual evidence, that it can't actually be proved that the Holocaust took place. So do you think it's right that it's a crime for Holocaust deniers to go around, or do you think freedom of speech should be upheld?
I honestly think that freedom of speech should be upheld. And I mean, he's a loon for like not thinking that the Holocaust like actually happened, and there is evidence, and I don't know why he thinks that there's no evidence. But I think everyone's entitled, like whether it's completely wrong, I think everyone's allowed to like have their own opinion, even though that's not really an opinion because there's like fact behind it. But I mean, I think that making it illegal to deny the Holocaust is not.
You don't think people should be punished for denying the Holocaust?
No, I don't think so. I mean, unless they were like putting people in harm's way, like for whatever they were doing to like preach their word or what they believed in. But like, if that's just their opinion and they're handing pamphlets out and like holding a rally for it, like I don't think that they should be arrested for that.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So, do you think that the Holocaust could happen again today in the current political climate?
I think that it wouldn't happen in a developed country that's like in Western Europe or the United States. I don't think that would ever happen, but I'm sure in a developing country where the leader is very corrupt and like we don't have no developed nation has a presence in that country. I think it definitely could happen. Like I believe that history repeats itself and that we don't always like learn from our mistakes. And like people blindly follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people are afraid to like speak up about things and so I definitely think it's like human nature to like be a sheep and to follow the crowd and like see like even if you think something's like sketchy and shouldn't be happening, a lot of times people don't say anything. So I definitely think it could happen again.
Okay. Do you agree with the death penalty? A lot of the high-ranking officials were sentenced to death, as was Adolf Eichmann in the Eichmann trial. So do you think that was a right punishment?
No, I don't really think that the death penalty is like justice being served. Like I think that if someone has a heinous crime, like they should sit in prison forever until they die. And I also do kind of believe, yeah.
So do you think that how else could they have been punished? Just a life sentence in prison, or do you think that's harsh enough?
Well, I can't speak from experience. Like I know, like if one of my family members were murdered, like maybe I would think differently. But like from my life experiences, and I mean, I'm the first to admit, like I've lived in a bubble. Like I don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had too many like hardships with someone being killed like that. Like that's so awful. But yeah, I think that it's kind of an easy way out.
Mm.
But then if someone's family was completely murdered, like everyone, like I would think differently and want the death penalty.
Mm.
But from my experience, I think someone should just sit in prison and think about what they did for the rest of their life.
Okay, yeah. So where there's when a lot of people have problems apportioning the blame for the Holocaust. So I'll just give you a few examples. So, for example, the train driver who would have driven the Jews who were deported to the concentration camps every day, he must have known what he was doing. So, do you think what do you think he should have done, or do you think what punishment could he face, or should he face any punishment?
That's a tough question. I think, like again, like what I was saying before is people blindly follow and people follow orders, and like propaganda against like Jewish people started before World War II, and like so it was ingrained in a lot of people. Like you grew up with that, and that's what you think. So he probably did know what was happening, and I mean maybe he believed that like they were doing the right thing. But I don't know if you could. I mean, yeah, I guess.
Like a lot of the high-ranking officials, like Eichmann, that was his main argument. He said he was just a bureaucrat, and all he did was organize the trains. He just followed orders from his superiors, even though he was the one who was sending the Jews to the prison camps every day. So, do you think that's a fair argument to make, that he was just following orders?
I think it is, like...
Even though the higher up you go, you have to think that the ones who are higher up, if the train driver didn't know, then, like, that's one thing, but a high-ranking official in charge of deporting the Jews must have known what he was doing. He knew what was happening to the people that he was sending there, so even though he was just following orders, was their point that you have to say, I know I'm just listen to my superiors, but should I stop this or should I do something about this?
Yeah, I mean, no, I definitely think that he should have been tried and gone to jail, or he got the death penalty. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question.
Yeah, okay.
I think, yeah, I don't. I feel like there's so many people that were involved. Like, how would you even begin to like try every single train driver? And like, I mean, maybe he would. Now I'm like justifying what they did.
No,
but
that's a
like,
hard question. So that's the question. Where did the blame stop? So
yeah,
example,
exactly. Like, I don't know. Like, do you?
So a guard who worked in Auschwitz, who opened the door to the gas chambers and then closed the door.
Yeah, like, should he?
Yeah, what do you think? Does he get a?
Yeah, I mean, like, murder's wrong. In every religion, murder is like wrong. So I don't know. But then, geez, I'm talking in circles. I don't know. I just don't know. Like, you couldn't try everyone. So like, how do you choose like who in the lower ranking stuff? Like, I definitely understand like higher level officials who like made the call and had like a big view on like what was happening, but like I don't know how you would try every single person and like how you would choose that and like whether or not
Yeah.
like it, but what they were doing was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So
you think if you were to roughly pinpoint, you'd say after high-ranking officials and high-ranking army officials, everyone else shouldn't be punished or shouldn't be tried?
I think
roughly along that line.
I think if you could try everyone, we should have. But I don't know if that would like actually be possible. Like, then, did they try people who were
no.
like lower?
I think some guards did, but yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, like I would be interested to know like what actually.
Yeah.
Like, did they just like were they just like let free or?
Yeah. Yeah, we'd have to look into it. What about, say, just a normal person who was a member of the National Socialist Party, say a housekeeper, for example, but her political affiliations were with the National Socialist Party?
No, because unless they like acted on it and killed somebody, like I don't know, they didn't. Like, believing in something is different than acting on it, I think. And like, yeah, it's awful that that housemaid or whatever like was a Nazi, but in like a courthouse, like I don't know what she would be found guilty for, unless like believing in that is illegal. But then do you like what rules are that like, because there is no like world governing body. Yeah. So and like.
So you just have to live with it basically for your life that you supported that.
Yeah, and maybe he or she like thinks that what the U.S. and other democracies did is completely wrong, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay, almost done. So yeah, how strong is patriotism in your country, in America?
I think it's huge, and it's definitely people from other countries think that Americans have like big heads and what America does is always the right thing to do. And I think it starts at like a young age too, like how our history classes are taught. Like Americans like win every war that we've ever been in, even if we like really didn't. Or like even if there was like with the Vietnam War and the Korean War, like it's kind of like skirted around. We don't really like dive too deep into it. I can't remember if this is gonna make me sound dumb. If the Korean War or the Vietnam War is like the forgotten war, but it's called the Forgotten War because like we don't.
It's probably Vietnam.
We don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
Because we like weren't the clear victors.
Yeah. Do you think that the Second World War maybe had an impact on patriotism in America?
Yeah, for sure. Because before that, there was the Great Depression, and then during World War II, all of our factories and stuff just started like cranking out military weapons and stuff like that. So our economy started to do a lot better, and we won the war. We dropped a huge bomb, and
Europe powerhouses.
And Europe was completely demolished. And then so I definitely think morale was high for Americans, and then you can even see it into the Cold War. Like it was the U.S. democracy versus communism in the USSR. Like it was huge. Like everyone was so patriotic and like totally against communism, like terrified of it. We were like rounding up movie actors because we thought they were socialists. So I definitely think patriotism increased after World War II.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what do you know about the Nuremberg trials? Like, if you had to describe them in a few sentences, how would you do that?
So after the Allied forces had won, World War II, they got all the prominent Nazi party people and put them to trial for the war crimes that they committed during World War II.
Okay. Do you know what the charges were and under which law they were tried?
As far as I know, I think they created the tribunal specifically for this purpose. So as to what the laws were, I'm not entirely sure. I think they created like the victor countries created their law and then charged them for, I don't know, crimes against humanity or something like that. But I know it was the stepping stone to the International Criminal Court, so I'm guessing they created their own law. I don't know.
Yeah, so they were charged with conspiracy to war crimes, crimes against peace and crimes against humanity, and they were tried under international law. So they created the new charter and said it's all in customary international law. So do you think there has been the principle of legality, so prohibition of retroactivity, do you think that might have been violated, or do you think even if that would have been justified, do you think there might have been problems? Or
I think there is a problem of retroactivity, but I think there are fundamental principles of what is right and what is wrong. And I think clearly, creating concentration camps is clearly wrong. So whilst you might be retroactively applying this law that they have just created, they're based on fundamental basic principles. So I don't think there is a problem.
Okay. So when and where, like how did you hear about the Nuremberg trials for the first time?
Well, we talked about World War II in school. So that's in secondary school, and I guess you can continue to learn more about it as you go to college and stuff. So I think, they kind of just swept through it really quickly because the main focus is obviously the actual war. So in terms of how much I know about it, I don't know that much about it. Just kind of like the basics of what it's about.
So that there have been trials, you learned about that in secondary school?
Yeah, but not the, substantive, what was the trial about, who was tried and things like that. No, not really.
Okay. So if Germany or Japan had won the war, do you think that the US would have been prosecuted for war crimes? Do you think that was likely or not?
I'd like to think that they would have been. International law applies to everyone, regardless of who you are. So I guess I would like to think so, yeah.
Okay. And in Germany and in France, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust. It is legal in the US. Do you think, so what provision do you prefer? Do you think it should be prohibited or not?
I don't know. I think you have to balance between, you know, free speech and denying what is fact. So I think it should be prohibited, because I think everyone should know about it. Everyone should realize the atrocities of how bad the Holocaust was. And I think this should be an exception to free speech, because this is just such a heinous crime that I think people should know about it.
Okay. What could be the advantages or disadvantages of prohibiting the denial?
Well, obviously you're infringing on someone's freedom of speech, but if, you know, you have concrete facts to show that the Holocaust had happened, then I don't think it's that much of a problem.
What do you think were the long-term effects of the Nuremberg trials on Germany or international criminal law and other countries in a legal but also in a non-legal way?
Well, from my impression of the Nuremberg trials, they were kind of like the stepping stone towards creating the International Criminal Court, which has been used in further genocides that have happened in history. And I think, you know, the fact that they went through a trial, they didn't just get executed, it shows that they went through, you know, some form of due process and that they were subject to law. It wasn't just, we won the war, therefore we're going to kill everyone who essentially lost in the war. So I think it was important to show, you know, moving forward from the war, that we are a democratic group of countries that have won, and people are subject to due process.
Do you support the death penalty, or what do you think about it?
I personally don't support the death penalty, no.
So do you think it was the wrong decision to apply the death penalty in the Nuremberg trials?
I think so, yes. Because it's almost a cop-out, I think, because they need to realise the magnitude of what they've done, and if they were put to prison and, you know, had the time to think about the consequences of their actions, I think that would have been a greater punishment than immediately just killing them off. And in some ways, you could even see the fact that they were executed. They, you know, the extreme right could say, oh, they're martyrs for their cause, and they were killed because of what they believed in, rather than, you know, being subject to life imprisonment.
Who do you think, if you had to say who was responsible for the Holocaust or who was guilty, who do you think would that be? So the high-ranking officials, or all the workers in the concentration camp, everyone who was involved, or everyone who was even only a member of the party, everyone who didn't speak up, or would the only innocent people be the ones who did not actively resist? What do you think?
I think it's obviously the greater responsibility is placed on the people who ordered it, but I also think the people who failed to do anything from the beginning, or, you know, voiced their opposition, is also to blame in some ways, because, you know, it's small incremental changes that led to the Nazi Party getting to where they are, and if they were opposed from the very beginning and taken seriously as a threat, then maybe they wouldn't have gotten so far into power. So yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest responsibility are on the high-ranking officials, but I think also lower down, they should also be responsible in some way.
Yeah. So where should we draw the line between moral guilt and legal guilt in this respect?
I think it's difficult. I mean, people who failed to do anything obviously have a moral responsibility. Why didn't I do this earlier on? That kind of thing. But in terms of who should be prosecuted, I think it should be the high-ranking officials who did order, you know, the slaughtering of millions of people.
Okay. Do you know the decision Roe v. Wade?
Yes.
Okay. Have you heard about the Eichmann trials? The Eichmann trial?
No, I haven't, no.
So just a brief overview. So Eichmann was one of the high-ranking Nazi officials, and he fled to Argentina after the war, but then he was captured by the Israeli Secret Service and brought to Israel and was tried in Israel. But basically he was behind the logistics of the Holocaust. He was one of those desk murderers. He organized everything. So considering that Roe v. Wade legalized abortion, and considering that Eichmann was responsible for the logistics by the administrative work that he did, Who do you think killed more people, the judges in Roe v. Wade or Eichmann?
I think that's difficult to say because Roe v. Wade goes to the fundamental question of, is a fetus a human being? So if you accept that a fetus is a human being, then every single abortion that was performed and legalized as a result of Roe v. Wade would be essentially a death of a person. But if you don't accept that a fetus is a person, then that's not a killing, and you would say that Eichmann is the person who killed the most people.
So if you say that fetuses are people, you could argue that both killed approximately the same amount of people.
Well, I don't know how many abortions were committed, but...
Okay, do you think that you could or even should compare these two cases of abortion jurisprudence and Eichmann?
No, I think they're fundamentally different. I mean,
they both created the administrative basis for killing people if you say that fetuses are people.
I mean, you could draw a comparison, but I think it's different because, you know, there's still that moral debate going on in Roe v. Wade whether a fetus is a person. So I don't think it's directly comparable, but I can see why you would.
So what would be the difference?
Well, as I said, it's the debate as to whether a fetus is a person, and the fact, like, all the people that Eichmann have killed are, you know, fully formed human beings, whereas in Roe v. Wade, you already have that initial, you know, is a fetus a person question. So whether you would categorize that as a murder, you know, that's still inconclusive.
So that depends on your moral values.
Yeah.
So what is the difference? Why is saying that a Jew is not a person worse than saying that a fetus is not a person?
Well, a Jewish person is a person.
But
whereas
how do you know that?
Well, there are certain characteristics that all human beings possess, and Jewish people, you know, whether you're black, white, you know, Asian or whatever, you all have the same body parts, the same, you know, being, but a fetus arguably doesn't have that.
So you would turn to biology and make this the basis for your argument?
Yes, without going into eugenics, obviously, but...
What do you think? How strong is patriotism in your country?
I think it's pretty strong. I think it depends how you frame patriotism as well. If you mean it in like the Nazi sort of way, I mean there's always going to be undercurrents of that kind of patriotism, but patriotism in the sense that you are loyal to your country, I think that's present everywhere, and I think it's present in England too. Yeah,
so it has a very, just in terms of, does it have a strong expression? Do people frequently say they're proud of their countries? So I'm not talking about national socialism at all. So.
Oh yeah, I think that there's a strong expression of patriotism within the UK. I mean, you could see that within the London Olympics. Everyone really rallied to support Great Britain in the Olympics, and you can see that with the monarchy when it was her birthday. You can kind of see patriotism there. So yeah, I would say that it's quite strong in the UK.
Would you think, or do you think that the war or that National Socialism, so how it escalated in Germany, do you think that had an impact on patriotism in other countries, especially in the UK? Do you think it changed, that people like reconsidered how patriotic they are, or that it might be dangerous, or do you think it didn't have any impact at all?
I think it's just a reframing of what patriotism is, because there are forms of Nazism in the UK, but just rebranded in a different way. For example, the English Defence League, they're very, you know, white supremacist sort of, they have a white supremacist sort of ideology, but they call themselves the English Defence League. They don't call themselves the National Socialist Party, you know. It's just a different form, but I still think there are undercurrents of the bad kind of patriotism. So I think it's just a reframing of the underlying values.
So what do you know about the Nuremberg trials? Like, how would you explain them in a few sentences?
I'm going to start by saying that my knowledge of the Nuremberg trials is limited. It's just in scope of what I took in an international law class.
Mm-hmm.
Never really covered it in like my history classes or anything like when I was in like, primary school or anything. Nuremberg trials basically just dealt with the consequences of World War II. Like how do you kind of seek justice for people who were war criminals and like took part in everything from the top down. So like Hitler killed himself. Like everyone who helped make it happen, he wasn't just running around by himself like, hey, this is what we're going to do. It was like kind of everyone complicit in the facilitating of the Holocaust and the subsequent trials that happened.
Do you know what the charges were and under which law the defendants were tried? So.
I remember that it was like it was a turning point in international law. That's what it was referred to as. I don't know the definitive like laws that people were prosecuted under. Crimes against humanity. I mean, but like, what would give me like a blue book citation? I can't do that. So.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I didn't know it either.
Oh.
So that it was actually not German law but international law because under German law was basically legal what they were doing. So. So you heard for the first time you heard about it in school in your history class?
In international law.
Oh, in international law.
I didn't hear about it in history class. Like, we didn't really talk about it. It's like mentioned, I think, but no one really remembers that.
Okay. Have you heard about the Eichmann trial?
Yes. He was like, he was one of the upper level people who just like said he didn't. He said he hadn't like regretted what he did, and that he was just kind of like, so he did what he had to do in essence. And I think he's like one of few people to ever actually be like executed, because of like what happened, I think. But
yeah. So after the war, he actually fled to Argentina.
Yeah.
The Vatican helped him with that, and then the Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, kidnapped him, and then there was this trial in Israel. And what is quite interesting is that in Nuremberg they only used documentary evidence, so they didn't have any witnesses. They wanted to have it really neutral, as neutral as it can be. And in the Eichmann trial, it was a bit more emotional. They had a lot of witnesses from the Holocaust seeing Eichmann in the concentration camps. And it was criticized a lot for using witnesses because it was a really emotional thing. So what do you think is better, like having all these personal stories, or keeping it more neutral and relying on the facts and the papers? What do you think is better?
My gut reaction as a lawyer is to just like stick to the facts. It's hard to play an emotional balancing game because you're never gonna win there. You're not gonna ever be able to like close the loop on like the emotional issue, especially one so like deeply personal as the Holocaust. I don't know, like, and no matter how many people you bring in there, talking about like what they might have felt or what like the witnesses like went through, you could put them on a stand and have them talk for the next 80 years, but it won't make up for like 80 minutes in a place like that, just sticking very cold, hard, rational, like this is the rule, this is how you violated it, this is what we'll do as reparation or an attempt at reparation, I think is better. But neither is perfect.
Yeah. And if Germany or Japan had won the war, do you think that the US would have been put on trial for some things that they did? Just in terms of would it have been likely?
I don't really know. Like one's like tempted to say yes, I guess so, but like I don't think if like trying to predict what would happen historically, I don't think it would be like a settled like here the U.S. will just accept defeat, all of the allies will just accept defeat, and we're going to like keep marching about, and there's going to be like a campaign to exterminate a group of people, an entire religion, just wipe off the face of the earth. I feel like if they may have won the war, quote unquote, they would lose the bigger war. In the long run, I feel like there would be some kind of protest and eventual toppling of the Nazi ideology. in the interim, would the U.S. people be prosecuted for like trying to support causes that were against what the state viewed as the correct ideology? Probably, but I don't really know.
So, for example, for war crimes, thinking of the nuclear bombings, do you think that this would have been one thing that could have been put on trial for?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not. It's easy really to demonize like what at the end of the day everyone's human, and even the Eichmann mentality of like you did what you had to do. One doesn't really know what they would do if they were placed in a similar position. And then we really casually talk about how, I mean, the U.S. dropped 3 nuclear bombs. Like this is something we knew would cause massive harm, and has had long-term consequences. We just really don't talk about it. We kind of just say it like, oh yeah, there was the Nazis running around doing a bunch of bad things, killing people unjustly, and then we dropped a nuclear bomb that wiped off like a giant portion of the Japanese population and led to like radiation, long-term damage, and a bunch of other things. But we beat the Nazis. It's a little self-serving, frankly. I think we could be found guilty of war crimes.
And in Germany and in France, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust, whereas it's legal in the US. So what do you think makes more sense? What provision are you in favor of?
I'm going to say that I'd prefer free speech. It's as bad as any string of events may be. It's about education, first and foremost. So if you want your society to understand and appreciate the consequences of an event, teach them about it. I mean, we have had other genocides, like this constant butchering of people in Latin America and Africa and elsewhere in Asia. The Armenian genocide, like we don't talk about these things. Not that any genocide is more important to know about than another. I think criminalizing the denial of a genocide is a bit of a step in the wrong direction. I mean, it's really just education. That should be the focus. Not on like, oh, if you disagree or if you just have a complete misunderstanding of what at least I assume to be facts, then maybe the issue is in education, not in like you directly.
Mm-hmm. And who do you think was, if you had to say who was responsible for the Holocaust or who was guilty? So was it only the high-ranking officials or all the workers in the concentration camps, considering that if one would have stepped out and if one had gone away, there would be another one filling his or her position, or everyone who was in the Nazi party, or everyone who did not speak up, everyone who did not actively resist? So who do you think would be guilty?
I mean, I'm just going to take a nice sweeping approach and say that a lot of people were complicit in what happened. If you see some injustice happening and you don't say something, then you're almost rubber stamping it. Every one of us is like a mini police officer for our own jurisdiction. Like if I saw someone like come up to you and just like punch you in the face, just like it would fundamentally bother me. I'm just like, what the hell are you doing? And like try to respond in some way to stop what I see as something that's wrong. That being said, if you were in a position in Germany where it's like someone's like, hey, punch this person in the face, or I'll punch you in the face. I don't know if like this power structure led to like a lot of people making assumptions that like, I don't know, Hitler was more than just a man. He's like flesh and blood and blood. They assumed him to be some kind of something else. The mob mentality, how people like kind of it's like, oh, here's this other group of people. They're the problem in this country. They're the issue, and I'm going to fix the problems if you help me. Like that kind of sales pitch is something that's common in leaders. I mean, all over the world. Demonizing of other people happens in the Middle East. It happens here, in the U.S. and it's on everyone. I mean, some people are initiators and some people are rubber stampers, and some people will kind of just hop on the bandwagon and like go along for their own personal reasons. Like if I had like a wife and kids and someone was just like, hey, the Pablo Escobar mentality, plata o plomo, like silver or lead. You're either, yeah, I'll pay you well and you do what I ask you to do, or I'll kill you. So it's not easy decisions to make. So it's easy for everyone to be like, oh yeah, everyone who took part in the Holocaust, or even the people who said nothing, are all wrong, and I think they are. But just the structure and the psychology, sometimes the prison isn't outside, it's in our heads. And I think that's what happened in Germany and elsewhere. So it's happening currently in the world too.
How much do you think that the average Germans actually know about the Holocaust? Because a lot of people say, well, we didn't know what was happening, we didn't know where the Jews were going. So what do you think? I know that you don't know that much about it, but
I feel like you'd be better to answer that question than I would be. But I'm assuming that the average German, at that time or today?
at that time.
At that time, I mean, when we studied the Holocaust, it seemed that like a lot of the atrocities came to light afterwards. So there was like bad things happening, and people were cognizant of them to some regard. But I don't know if the average German was like really like comprehending full breadth of what was happening. And I think like history has been able to paint the picture in all of its gruesome detail for us in a better way. I don't think like if you stopped a German on the street and were like, hey, do you know that people are being burned alive and like giant like I don't think that they would be cognizant of it. And then there might be the halo effect at that time too, where economically Germany might be succeeding, or like geographically it's expanding. All these things that are going to be deemed as positives. Simultaneously, the recoil from World War One. You see what you want to see and you hear what you want to hear. It's kind of like if you tell a mother that her like child stole something from a store, they don't want to believe it. It's just like, oh yeah, no, I saw him walk out with like with a pack of bubble gum. He's like, no, not my son, impossible, you know. And I feel like that's what people may have thought about Germany, and it's a sense of patriotism, and that's no one's immune from that, I think. So.
How strong would you say is patriotism in your country?
Strong to a fault.
Yeah. And do you think that the war or National Socialism had an impact on how patriotism is being perceived and how patriotic people are being nowadays? Do you think it had an impact, or do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in the machine. It had an impact. Can I quantify it? I think so.
So in which respect do you think?
Um,
So did something change, or are people more careful, or?
Socialism as it relates to the U.S. today.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
your country, yes.
I mean, I feel like the U.S. has always like prided itself on being a teaching nation. Like we are the U.S. We have this impeccable format on how to live life, and we are going to teach it to you. Oh, Germany, I see you're messing up all of Europe. Let's just go over there and teach you how it's done. The Middle East, oh, like you guys have problems with what you're doing. Let's show you how it's done. And then all of a sudden we have ISIS, and we have this, and we have that. We have a lot of problems. The U.S. is constantly trying to teach others how to do democracy. Granted, on like most democracy indices, the U.S. is not number one. It's not a pure democracy. It's just a unique system of government, and it works in its own way. I feel like the U.S.'s approach is kind of like, I like ketchup on my hot dogs, but if I see you with a hot dog, I go and take a bottle of ketchup and I pour it on your hot dog because I like it that way. I don't think that's appropriate. When it comes to socialism, though, I think that we perhaps can learn from nations that do have socialism, and I think a lot of the younger generation is like buying into that ideology. But there's still some very hard-pressed roots on like, no, we are America and we have it figured out. The rest of the world has to catch up with our greatness, whatever it may be. Some people are anti-socialism, some people are pro-socialism, and that's kind of the weird hodgepodge of like what the American electorate is. And you saw it in Bernie Sanders, and then we saw it in like President Trump. I mean, there's a wide array of people who support very different ideologies, often very combative of other ones that oppose theirs, to a fault, I think. So.
Yeah. So do you think that the fact that patriotism and nationalism escalated so much in Nazi Germany. Do you think that this had an impact on the US, that people are maybe a bit more suspicious with extreme nationalists, or do you think it had no impact at all? And I'm just, because I think in Germany it changed a lot, which is obvious because it's the same country, but do you think it also had an impact on the US, or not at all because it was another different country?
I would actually say it had the reverse effect. To some extent, it's look how fallible these people are. Look how obviously wrong what this group of people did is. We went over there and saved the world. I mean, like it's a very diluted version of what's written in our history textbooks, but like it focuses very much on American and U.S. involvement in World War II, ignoring for a fact that if the U.S. had not been involved, would the outcome have been the same? Probably. But there's a lot of credit taking, and I think that carries not just from history textbook writers alone, but I think it carries down to the most basic level of U.S. society, and we pride ourselves on being this infallible nation, and that sense of nationalism, the sense of like heroism, sense of like, oh no, we would never prosecute someone for their religious beliefs, is kind of delusional, but it kind of just inflated the very demon that we sought to fight, kind of.
Do you think that something like the Holocaust could happen again today, or in a few years, or in a few decades?
I mean, like the Holocaust is kind of a hard standard to compare to.
Such an escalation of nationalism that a certain group is being targeted.
Blinded. Genocides, much like snowflakes, kind of fall into the category that no two are alike. But they fall under the same depraved sense of like, this entire group of people who I'm going to make a sweeping generalization about are a threat to my entire group of people who I'm going to make sweeping generalizations about. And if I eliminate X, then all problems will be solved. That's been common for centuries. That's not exclusive to the Holocaust. It's happening in Africa, it's happening in Latin America, it's happening in the Middle East. And I just, the fact that it's not happening in Europe, it's not happening in North America, I think is the reason we don't talk about it. Oh, nothing bad has happened since the Holocaust. It's a really nice way to think, but it's wholly untrue. There are plenty of people, I mean, we talk about like ISIS, for example. They're killing large groups of Sunni Muslims for not practicing religion in the same way that they see as the correct way. Like it's a religious-based killing, and then sometimes they're killing other people as well. It's I am correct, and other people are incorrect, and if they don't buy in, out. And that kind of mentality is unfortunately still very prevalent. It was prevalent in Turkey against the Armenians, and could I see it happening again? The Hutu and the Tutsi in Rwanda. I mean, yes, I could see it happening again, unfortunately. Maybe not with the same scale, and I don't think anything will ever get the same attention the Holocaust gets. But yeah, that's.
So what do you know about the Nuremberg trials? Like, how would you explain them in a few phrases?
I don't actually think I know that much about them. I know there were military tribunals that were organized after World War II. I know that they're very well known. I think they're sometimes called like the greatest trials in history. I know that there was also a lot of controversy about them because I think they had a problem with all the languages because of the French, the German, the Russian, and the English. And also that a lot of people said that the judges weren't legitimate and that the court didn't even have any power and stuff. So I don't really know much about the trials, actually.
Okay, so you don't know what the charges were or under which law they were tried?
So I know that there was it was crimes against humanity, crimes against aggression, war crimes, things like that. And I know that there were several trials and they lasted a few years, but I don't actually know what happened at the end, probably. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so they were tried under international law. They created their own charter for the tribunal.
Okay.
And so the victory, like the powers that won the war, and they said that they took the charges from customary international law, and then they just said, well, this is already customary law, so we're going to put it in the charter. and there's a little bit of controversy whether this is actually whether that already had the status. Do you think that was problematic? If that was not 100% customary law status, or do you think that the need to prosecute those people was so pressing that you could say, well it doesn't
I think
really
it was pressing, except I think it's difficult to say, like, if every time there's like a really bad crime, like, can you always make an exception? So I feel like that is difficult to make an exception, but this was like a very exceptional like time, so I don't know, I feel like it's very difficult to answer that. So I understand the people that are saying having problems with it, but also I understand people who are saying we need to have these trials.
Yeah. Do you remember when and where and how you heard about the trials for the first time, so that there actually had been trials after the war?
I think so. I grew up in Australia, and in high school, in history, I learned about like the whole World War II, and then I heard about the trials. But because we didn't really have that much time, so we didn't actually, I mean, we probably mentioned Nuremberg trials, but I don't think we went into much detail about what actually happened in the trials. So probably when I was about, I don't know, 12, 13, something like that.
Okay. So just imagine if Germany or Japan had won the war, do you think that the US would have been prosecuted for war crimes?
Yeah, I actually thought about that. I'm not actually sure if that would have happened, because what happened in Germany was such an exceptional, like, I don't think something like that would have happened, or that Americans didn't do the same heinous crimes. So I feel like I don't think America would have been prosecuted.
What about the nuclear bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Do you think that would have been, do you think that would have met the definition, or that would have been a war crime, or?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that actually. Yeah, I guess now that I think about it, they should have probably been prosecuted the same amount. So.
In Germany and in France, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust, but it's not illegal in the US. So what do you think about it? Do you think it should be prohibited or not?
That's an interesting question, because I grew up in Australia,
yes.
And everyone there, you're allowed to talk about, like, there's no crimes for denying the Holocaust, and there's no crimes for, using the swastika or anything. And also being German, I feel like in Germany, I guess they have a lot more respect for the whole topic. And often in Australia, it's often made a joke out of and stuff. And I feel like if something is made a crime, then people will take it more seriously. So, yeah, I think that is, I think it's good the way they do it in Germany. But at the same time, I understand why Germany has to react differently to it than other countries. Just out of respect, even.
Okay. What do you think were the long-term effects of the Nuremberg trials, like on a social level, but also on a legal level, in international criminal law, but also in Germany? So what do you think was the... I
think in Germany it still has long-lasting impacts. I feel like you do know that a lot of people know a lot about it, and I think they also respect all the UN and what they're doing in the crimes against humanity. I feel like on a social level it did have a big impact, because I think because of the Nuremberg trials, the UN made wars against humanity and war crimes punishable, and I even made a charter, I think you had said, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that did change a lot, because people realized you can't get away with everything, especially countries.
So do you think that the trial was the best decision, because there had been some of the allies thought it would be better just to shoot everyone, or so do you think that the trial was the best decision?
I think the trial is better because using more punishment or violence wouldn't have solved the situation. And I feel like if you're a survivor, you want to see people being told that they're guilty for something. You don't want to just see them you don't want to just hear that they're shot and that's the end of the situation. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe they should have waited a little more time and maybe gotten a bit more organized so they had more time to fully work out, do we really have the power to prosecute and things like that.
Do you agree with the death penalty?
No, I don't. And I'm really against that. So studying here in America, I find that a bit strange. But no, I don't believe in the death penalty.
So in the trial they used the death penalty, they sentenced people to death. Do you think that was the right decision considering the crimes that they committed, or do you think even in this specific incident there should not have been the death penalty?
I find that difficult to answer because I believe I'm against the death penalty because I realize that people can be wrongly convicted and you can't, if someone's dead, you can't reverse their decision or their conviction. But in this case, you knew that all these people were responsible and in charge for the situation. So I feel like maybe I would make an exception to my being against the death penalty. I would make an exception in this case, I think, because the crimes were so severe.
And so thinking about who was responsible for the Holocaust, who do you think was responsible or who was guilty? So starting with the high-ranking officials, or everyone who did not actively resist, or everyone who worked in a concentration camp. So who do you think was guilty in participating in the Holocaust?
Well, I think that's also difficult to say because I don't think just one person was guilty. I feel like everyone contributed in one way or another. So the people that saw something and just turned away, or the people that were actually responsible for example, the death camps, the concentration camps. So I feel like everyone played a part in some way or another, and some people more and some people less. And I feel like the people that did play the main parts should be prosecuted, and that's what happened in the Nuremberg trial.
Do you think that the Holocaust could happen again today?
I feel if you're looking at what's happening in Syria, I mean, it's similar. They're using gas against their own citizens, and people aren't really doing anything because it's a really hard thing to intervene. Also, even in North Korea, people that there are they have like camps for labor camps for people, and you hear about them getting raped and killed and stuff. So I feel like it is happening in a certain way, but not in a small way. It is already happening, and no one's doing anything. So I do believe it could happen again.
And right now, in many different countries around the globe, we have a rise of new nationalist movements. Do you think that these nationalist movements can be compared in some way to the rise of the National Socialism back then? Or do you think it's not comparable at all? Do you see similarities?
I think I do see a little bit because they're against, like, for example, in Europe, the big thing is being against refugees. And I feel like that's how it started in Germany, saying, like, the Jews are bad. So I feel like you do see some similarities because they're being like, we don't want any refugees. And I feel like that's the same thing as saying, like, we don't want any Jews, or we don't want any homosexual people, or what they said back then. So I do see a lot of similarities between those two.
And how strong would you say is patriotism in your country, Germany?
Well, in Germany, I actually think it's, comparing Germany and Australia, in Germany to be patriotic is already, people think you're a little bit right-wing, you don't see the German flag a lot except for maybe when the World Cup is, or the European Cup for soccer. But in Australia, like once a year, there's Australia Day, and everyone's so proud to be Australian. So I feel like in Germany, people are not patriotic, and in Australia, people are very patriotic. So having those comparisons, I think a lot of it has to do with the whole National Socialist era.
So you think that's the reason why people are a bit more careful being
patriotic? I think so too, because if you're too patriotic, straight away people will think, oh, like, why is this person being so for Germany? And I don't really understand it, to be honest, though, because I feel like just because you're for your country doesn't mean you're straight away right-wing, but in Germany you do get that feeling that that's a general feeling that people have.
And how much do you think the average Germans back then knew about what was actually going on?
I think they do. For example, my grandfather actually told me that his parents, they lived on a farm, and when all the Jews were getting rounded up, they actually hid a few Jews in their, they lived in a farm in the top of the farm, like in the attic. And I feel like if people in remote farming areas are already noticing, like, okay, these are Jews and they're being persecuted, we have to protect them, I feel like people did know. And I think it is easy to look away in that sort of situation. But, so I think people did know what was happening. Maybe some people tried to deny it, but I think everyone did know in some form.
Have do you know about the decision Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, I do, about the abortion, that abortion is illegal in America.
And do you know who Adolf Eichmann was?
Yeah, he,
Yeah, so he was behind all the
Yeah.
logistics for the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And just considering that the Supreme Court judges in Roe v. Wade basically made it possible, played the role in the administrative to make it possible to have abortions, and considering that Adolf Eichmann was in the administrative the person who made the Holocaust also possible, who do you think killed more people, the judges in that decision or Adolf Eichmann?
Well, I don't actually believe that abortion is killing a person. I actually believe it's a fetus, which is not a person yet. So I don't think any of those judges were responsible for the deaths of anyone. So of course I believe Eichmann is killed more people, because I don't think I don't think the decision means that people are being killed.
So what is the difference between saying that fetuses are not people and saying that Jews are not people? Well, is there a difference between saying that, or?
Well, yeah, because I mean, Jews are people.
But how do you know that?
Okay. So they're born. I mean, they have a birth certificate. Fetuses do not have a birth certificate. I guess that's the way I would distinguish those two.
So you would go to science and try to base your argument on science.
Yeah,
and
I would.
biology.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe just say your name and where you're from.
My name's Addison. I'm from New York City, but my parents were both Chinese, and I'm a second generation US born Chinese.
Cool. And what do you know about the Nuremberg trials?
Well, I knew that they were held in Nuremberg. I knew that they were trials to basically give trials to the German leaders at the time, like German, that committed war crimes.
Okay. How were you taught these? Were you taught about them in school, or did you just hear about them through other channels?
I mean, I heard about them through other people mainly, and it's just small talk. Some people held opinions about it, and yeah.
And how, when you heard about them, were they usually discussed in sort of a positive or negative light, or did people take quite a neutral stance?
Well, mostly it was held that they thought the Nuremberg trials were righteous, and that it was the right thing, and that these the people that were persecuted and tried were justly persecuted and tried.
Or like, what do you think about the fact that they were held in Germany as opposed to, well,
in a neutral country?
Yeah.
I mean, to my view, like, it seemed like they were trying to make a political statement more than anything, because it definitely did not need to be held in Germany. If anything, I would say it should have been held in a neutral country, but...
Okay, I'm going to move on from that question. Alright, just a few more questions, like expanding then on like the greater idea. So if Germany and Japan had won the war, do you think the US would have been prosecuted for war crimes? And had they been, do you think this would have been right?
Well, had Germany and Japan won the war, the US definitely would have been persecuted for the war crimes, because the US were... so, for example, the only reason why German leaders were persecuted was because the US won and the Germans lost the war. If the Germans had won the war, then they would not be responsible in any sort of way, and history is written by the winners.
Okay. Do you know who Adolf Eichmann is?
No, I do not.
Okay, so basically he was one of the people who ran the concentration camps and sort of, you know, was overseeing the death of all the millions of Jews. Do you know the case Roe v. Wade?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so do you think, or who do you think has killed more people then? The judges who decided Roe v. Wade or Adolf Eichmann? who ran the concentration camps?
Well, I do not think it's a question of who killed more people.
Who
Rather,
sanctioned the death of more people?
like who is not. I feel like it's not a question of who sanctioned the death of more people and like the numbers that have perished because of these decisions, more so than the implicit meaning behind these sanctions, because the concentration camps was basically, it was trying to wipe out a race, while like that was the main idea behind the concentration camps, while the main idea behind Roe v. Wade was more of a decision to give choice to people, to mothers, to families that did not want to come under the burden of having to support a child, or was not ready for a child, or simply did not want a child at all.
So do you think it's fair to compare these two cases then?
I mean, I could definitely see where this is coming from, but I do not think that these two are comparable.
Okay. Then, if we consider the value system of the National Socialists, like the Nazis, and in how they viewed Jews and like distinguished them as like a lower class, how can you see any distinguishments between how we treat animals, like particularly whales and not kept in captivity? Do you think like we can justify treating another species, I suppose, at a lower level of like respect because we feel that we have a superiority to them and that we're in the position of power?
Well, actually, in that sense, I believe that there is something called basically might makes right, and so we are more powerful than the whales and than the animals, and we're more powerful than the cows and the chickens that we eat every day. And another thing is that the cows and the chickens that we eat every day are not does not have the mental ability to actually not.
So then, should we be allowed to treat those with lower mental ability in a lower sense? Because Hitler did kill those who were disabled.
That's harsh. That's hard. I do not know how to answer that.
Okay, that's fair. We can move on. In Germany and France today, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust, and it's not illegal in the US. Which provision do you prefer, and which do you think is better? And do you think there should be a difference, considering that it was, in Germany and France, like the war was fought in Europe, and maybe that's why?
Well, although I do agree with some provisions of the free speech of the United States, I do not think that outright lying and denying historical events, and especially historical events that had great impact, is fair at all. And so, no, I do not think that it is right for people in America to deny that the Holocaust had happened. And if I may, that is also something that's actually a huge problem for China and Japan relationships, because Japan has up till now denied all the war crimes that they have committed during or near the periods of World War II, and have not paid any compensation to China, while on the other hand, Germany, which did basically much of the same thing, has admitted it, has openly apologized. So, and if I can't help but wonder if that is because of the relationships at that time between the U.S. and Germany and the U.S. and Japan.
Okay. Do you agree with the death penalty?
I actually think that the death penalty is a necessity. And why is it a necessity? Yes, there is many reasons. There are many people that argue the death penalty is not right. It's savage. It's barbaric, and that the reason that people are arrested and jailed and have to go through the legal system is not because that they are to be punished. It's because that society is to be reformed. But many of the people that say this are actually comes from societies where crime is not as much of an issue as other places. For example, if people come from Germany, France, England.
Do you think then there's any connection between the fact that most European countries don't have the death penalty, but we have significantly lower crime
I
rate?
believe that although there are some correlations, but it's not a large correlation. It's not a huge factor in between countries with no death penalty and the decreased crime rate. I think more of what it is because countries that like these countries with with no death penalty, they already have the for lack of a better word, the cultural finesse, the societal understanding of the law, and they're death fearing, and they also have a societal wealth that they do not need to come out and do this. But for many other countries, they are, for lack of better words, they're less culturally, societally, economically wealthy, and they sometimes I feel like the death penalty is a deterrence to for them to not commit crimes.
Okay. Who do you think is most responsible for the Holocaust? Like, who do you think we should draw the line of guilt? So there's some options here. The high-ranking officials, all the workers in the concentration camps, everyone in the Nazi party, everyone who failed to actively speak against the whole era, and then anyone who just didn't actively resist. Where would you draw the line of guilt?
I would draw the line of guilt at the people that were directly involved with the concentration camps. And of course, including the leaders that gave the orders.
Okay. Do you think it'd be possible for the Holocaust to ever happen again, or a similar event of such magnitude?
Yes, of course, and it's still happening. Like there's still concentration camps in North Korea. The U.S. still did. The U.S. also did something similar to the concentration camp during the Kuramasu case, which apparently it was okay to do because the U.S. was at war, which I think that is something that needs to be looked into if they're going to be condemning the Germans for placing people into concentration camps for war.
Okay. Do you think that the modern nationalist movements are comparable to the rise of the National Socialist regime in Germany at the time?
I'm sorry, what?
So do you think that the modern forms of nationalism kind of growing up, like here in America, the Netherlands, France, Germany, like all these sort of nationalist parties, can you compare, or do you see a comparison between the rise of them and the rise of the National Socialist regime, like the Nazi party, basically.
I mean, a thing now is that many parties are not able to do so because there is, for not even just legalities, there is social shaming, and when people do these things, there are groups, government organizations, NGOs, international ones, that shame these, that does public shaming on these organizations if they ever did step out of line. And I think because we have such a advanced technological communications right now, such as we have access to all these information of all the things that are happening in the world right now. If something of that caliber was to happen in recent day, then there would definitely be more resistance, more more awareness.
So you think that people who would draw comparisons between Donald Trump and his sort of rhetoric against anyone basically who's not American, but Muslims, Mexicans, do you think he's better controlled because there's higher levels of media and more criticism of him openly and nationally than Hitler was when he was rising and blaming the Jews for all the problems?
Well, first of all, there's definitely more criticism of Donald Trump than there was of Hitler. At least, in comparison, more people in the U.S. criticized Donald Trump than people in Germany used to criticize Hitler. But I think that the with lack of more knowledge, I can't make more comments.
Fair. How strong is the patriotism in your country?
Well, in the United States, it is definitely very strong. To be honest, I don't think there aren't many countries in the world that have stronger patriotism than the United States.
And where is the line between patriotism and nationalism?
I actually do not understand the concept. What do you define as nationalism?
I'll probably cut this out. But at home, I am patriotic. I decked the house out in Irish flags, but I'm not nationalistic. But at home, to me, nationalistic would mean I would stand with the IRA in their views of a full Ireland and everything. And I'm not a nationalist, but I can love my country. So I think patriotism is loving your country and being proud to be from somewhere, and nationalism is, in my mind, a darker, seedier idea of I think an awful lot of people who voted for Donald Trump, the people who voted for Marie Le Pen, the people who voted for Geert Wilders, I think that's something built out of nationalism and believing your country is your country and it's ours and it's just for us, as opposed to patriotism. I think anyone can be a patriot of any country.
Okay. So I think there's nothing.
It's just a laptop.
So I think there's nothing wrong with patriotism, because there's nothing wrong to be proud of the country that you're born in, proud of what your lifestyle is. But I think nationalism, if it results in things such as overly broad foreign involvement and overly broad or basically cynicism, then I think that's where I draw the line. If you're going to deny immigrants from coming in to a country that was made up of immigrants, then I think that is nationalism and not patriotism.
Okay. And do you think that World War II had an impact on patriotism?
Of the United States?
We'll do, yeah, for the United States. Do you think it's impacted your level or Americans' level of patriotism?
Well, yes, definitely. The United States think that, first of all, they think that they are the major reason why World War II was won, and that because of the United States, then everyone has a better life, everyone has some freedom, but without recognizing facts such as the main reason why the Allies won the World War II was because of the immense military force that Russia had placed into the war.
Okay, and that's it.
Hello, my name is Katarina. I'm from Germany.
Okay, and what do you know about the Nuremberg trials?
So the Nuremberg trials were the first international criminal law trials where high-level perpetrators from the Nazi regime were held accountable for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of the war of aggression. Interestingly, they were not held accountable for genocide, even though the acts of genocide were framed under crimes against humanity. I think it was Article 6C of the Charter of the Tribunal.
And were there any problems with the principles of legality in the trials?
So at the time the acts were committed, they were not crimes under the law in Germany at that time, and also we didn't have the same system of international criminal law as we have today. So there was a problem with the nullum crimen sine lege principle.
And when did you first hear about the trials? Was it in school or university or more general?
That was in high school. I think it was in year 6 or year 7, so I was around 12 or 13 years old. I don't remember the details of the way we were taught, but I remember we did an excursion to a museum which was in Nuremberg. There is also the so-called Reichsparteitagsgelände, where the Nazis had their celebrations, their annual celebrations. So we visited that at the same day. And then after that, we went to a museum about the Nuremberg trials. But we also had classes on it in school, but that was the event that I recall.
Okay, and how were they taught? Were they taught in a more critical viewpoint or a negative light, or was it quite neutral?
To be honest, I don't remember the details because I was quite young. I think it was a quite neutral point. We obviously didn't go into the details of the law, whether it was against those principles, those legal principles. I think it was more just about which perpetrators were trialed and which impact it had on society.
Okay. And now, do you think the trials that were held, were they fair? Were they fair trials?
To what I know, to the extent of what I remember, I think they were fair trials from point of view of procedure. And I think they were known to be quite boring trials. So, for example, reporters from all over the world, they came and then they left again after a couple of days because they felt like it's a legal proceeding. So when legal proceedings are fair, they're not like a theater, which is interesting to watch. Very technical, a lot of evidence, many documents. I think they were fair trials, especially when compared to, for example, the Eichmann trial in Israel.
Just moving then on to Nuremberg and Eichmann. One was carried out with, like you said, the more documentary evidence. And then I think it was Eichmann was tried. Okay, maybe I could have that wrong. One of them was used an awful lot more like emotive evidence and more witnesses. Which do you think is kind of a fairer way to try such a...
So I think in the courtroom, it should be about law and nothing but the law. I think that international criminal tribunals should not be used to build history or to tell history. I think historical evidence can be useful in a trial, but it should be used in a way that tells about the individual responsibility of the accused and should not extend to storytelling. So I don't want to judge about this kind of evidence in general. It always depends on the way it is used and how the experts and the court deal with it.
Okay. And what do you think about the fact that the trials were then held in Nuremberg in Germany?
I think that was good because it gave the population a feeling of a little more ownership of the trials, especially because they were organized, so to say, by the victory parties. So I think the fact that they were placed in Nuremberg was at least a way to give the population some ownership of the trial. And moreover, it's a symbolic place because it's also the place where the Reichsparteitag was held.
Okay. And then just moving to some sort of more thought-provoking questions. So do you think if Germany and Japan had won the war, the US would have been prosecuted?
Well, no, I don't think so. And this is not because I think that the US didn't do things in Japan that could be called war crimes. But I think if Germany and Japan would have won the war, we wouldn't have an international criminal law because those actors, they didn't care about legality. So I think we just wouldn't have the same system, and that's why there would have been no prosecutions.
Okay. And are you familiar with the US Supreme Court case, Roe versus Wade?
Yes, that's the case where abortion was legalized.
So who do you think has killed or sanctioned the death of more people? The Supreme Court judge who decided Roe v. Wade or Adolf Eichmann?
So I think even for those who would argue that fetuses are persons, they would have to agree that at the time this case was decided, the fetuses for the future did not even exist, and you cannot kill someone or be responsible for someone's death if this, for some people called person, didn't exist at the time of the decision, if that makes sense. So I don't even feel like it is necessary to go into detail about the abortion.
Comparison?
I don't think it's a fair comparison.
Okay. And then if you kind of look at the valuing system the Nazis put in place, that Jews were of a lower class or society and were to be exterminated and to be taken and put in concentration camps, is there any way you can see that, like a distinguishment between that and how we treat animals perhaps, and animals in captivity, such as like whales in SeaWorld, and cases like PETA have brought saying that it's torture and it's captive and you can't do it? Do you think that's a comparison that we can draw?
No, for the simple reason that there is a biological difference between humans and animals, but not between Jews and other people. So it's all about the biological difference. And this is like, I condemn the way in which some animals are held, farm animals as well as whales in SeaWorld, but it's just not a comparison to be made.
Okay. In Germany and in France, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust, whereas in America, it's not. There's freedom of speech. Which provision do you prefer? Which do you think is a fairer? Or
this is an interesting question. I think both approaches are justified in their own domestic legal systems. We do have freedom of speech in Germany and France. But for example, the provision in the German criminal law code, I believe it is section 103, could be wrong on that, 130. However, I remember that the German Constitutional Court justified it by saying that our constitution is built upon the agreement that we never want to live in a system like the Nazi system again, and that everyone who abuses our freedoms, for example, our freedom of speech, in order to build something like the Nazi regime again, is not protected by the freedoms. So I think, considering the history of the German law, it is okay to have a provision that prohibits to deny the Holocaust, whereas the US, which doesn't have to do much with, like the way the Constitution here was written, was not in response to the Nazi crimes. So it's just a different setting.
Okay. What do you think the long-term effects of the Nuremberg trials have been on Germany?
I think, well, I'm too young to know which immediate impact they had, but they definitely gave the people a feeling that there's accountability for crimes like this, and that there are some crimes that are so inhumane that you cannot get away with them, no matter in which time or which system you live.
And do you think then there have been any long-term effects on international criminal law?
Yes, definitely. The Nuremberg trials were like the foundation of international criminal law. They set precedent for future cases, and they also just showed the need for an international criminal law system.
Okay. And then do you think they've set any sort of precedent for subsequent international trials?
So the law has changed a lot after this. I think international criminal law learned a lot from mistakes that were made at the Nuremberg trials. For example, that genocide wasn't prosecuted in the way it should be. The focus was very much on the war of aggression. So I think future tribunals, for example, the one for Rwanda or former Yugoslavia, definitely learned from that. And also just the fact that like an ad hoc tribunal can be established that of course influenced future trials.
Okay. And an awful lot of the leading members of the Nazi Party were tried with the focus on the death penalty. So where do you stand on the death penalty?
I'm against the death penalty. There are so many reasons for this. I believe it is not, it doesn't help the purposes of criminal justice as I see them, but I don't even want to go into detail about that because it is just against my belief in the human dignity. I think a society that punishes people with the death penalty puts itself on a level equal to those who committed the crimes.
Okay. Moving from then, where do you think we should draw the line with those, or should the line have been drawn with those who are responsible for the Holocaust? Do you think it lies purely just with the high-ranking officials, or with anyone who just worked in the concentration camps or actively participated, anyone just in the party, or anyone who didn't actively resist in Germany at the time?
For the purposes of criminal law, everyone should be prosecuted according to their own individual guilt and not a system. So I think we have to make a difference between responsibility, and I would say that everyone in Germany at that time was to some extent responsible for what happened. But that doesn't mean that I think everyone should be subject to criminal proceedings, because especially in international criminal law, it is just from the point of view of the resources impossible to put everyone on trial. And then again, just the distinction between responsibility and individual guilt.
Okay. Do you think it'd be possible for the Holocaust to ever happen again today?
It would not be possible in Germany, I think, or at least I like to believe so. I think that it would be possible for something like that to happen again. And I think our understanding of, for example, the genocide definition is different to what the legal genocide definition says. And I think the law should react to that and change the genocide definition to react to our more globalized world, so that situations in the future that we would classify as genocide, but that wouldn't be genocide under law, for example, attacks against gender groups, attacks against social or political groups could be prosecuted.
Okay. Do you think that the modern nationalist movements kind of taking over a lot of Europe and even in America at the moment have any comparable similarities to the rise of the Nazi regime?
When just looking at the way those populist movements rise, yes, definitely there are similar movements, and also this whole idea of blaming one group of people for problems in society. All this gives rise to populist movements, but I think we definitely cannot say that they amount to something like the Nazi regime at the moment.
Okay. Moving back to Germany, how strong would you say patriotism is in your country?
It is not strong, especially compared to the US or other countries, but unfortunately it is on the rise.
Okay. And where would you draw the line between patriotism and nationalism?
I think someone who would say he's a patriot, he would probably be proud of his national identity and maybe impose measures to protect what he sees important to his national identity. But a nationalist is someone who would fight for the national identity, and especially a national socialist would do anything regardless of civilian casualties or anything to protect what he sees as his nation.
Okay. Do you think the war has had an impact on patriotism?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Sorry, do you think that the war, World War II, had an impact on patriotism in your country?
In Europe, definitely, because I see that in the US, the word patriot or being patriotic is, it has a positive connotation. For example, look at the Patriots Act that was passed after 9/11. People in Congress agreed on it because I think one of the reasons was because not being a patriot here is seen as something negative. And you see American flags all over the country. Whereas in Germany, patriotism implies something negative. And for example, if people would have a German flag in their front yard in Germany, we would think they're Nazis.
Okay, that's all the questions. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, I don't think so. Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay, so what do you know about the Nuremberg trials?
So the Nuremberg trials were criminal proceedings established by the Allies after the Second World War to prosecute Nazi German officials, including army men, politicians, doctors, lawyers. Most people they could prosecute from the Nazi regime.
Do you know what the charges were under which they were accused and under which law they were actually tried?
So, from what I remember, they were accused for war crimes, obviously, in the first instance, but also I would say genocide. But I'm not sure if at the time the concept of genocide was fully developed. Not sure, and probably crimes against humanity.
Yeah, so the charges were conspiracy to crime of aggression, war crimes and crimes against humanity. And they were tried under international law, so the Allies created their own charter for the tribunal in London, and they said all these crimes have already customary law status in international law, so we're just going to put them in the charter. Do you think that there might have been a problem with the principle of legality, like the prohibition of retroactivity? And even if there had been a problem, do you think that would be justified by the crimes, that you can make an exception for that?
I think justice would say that you would require an exception to the non-retroactive rules on procedure and substantive law to prosecute this type of conduct. I also think that, it's a balance. On one side, you have like the right of due process of these Nazis officials, and the right, obviously, to be prosecuted to rules previously established under a procedure previously established. But this was like a state of exception that the very special conditions met with the Nazis in Germany and in Europe that justify this type of exception.
Okay. When and how did you hear about it for the first time, that there have been trials after the war? So when did you learn about them?
So in high school in my country, we learned when we were studying the Second World War, we studied the Nuremberg trials a little bit.
Okay. Just imagine if Germany or Japan had won the war. Do you think that the US would have been prosecuted for war crimes? So do you think there has been anything they would have been prosecuted for, or rather not?
The Germans prosecuting Americans and the Allies if they had won the war? Yes, for sure. Like historically, every country or nation that wins a war have the priority to and the prerogative to prosecute or initiate proceedings against the enemies, the defeated enemies. In this case, it was actually interesting. I remember that there was a discussion that Stalin, I think he wanted to execute everyone. But the American president, which I think, if I remember well, Roosevelt didn't want that, and Churchill either. So they actually convinced Stalin that these trials should happen instead of executing them. So I guess the Japanese and the Germans would likely, who knows, maybe just execute the officials or have proceedings to legitimize their new regime in the world. It's a difficult question.
Yeah. So do you think there has been conduct by the US that would have warranted prosecutions? Do you think that they actually committed war crimes and for which they could have been prosecuted?
No. It's an interesting question because the definition of war crimes can be very flexible, depending on who's prosecuting. Obviously, there is case law and there is a legal tradition, but when you interpret this case law and this legal tradition to different circumstances, so it could actually be the case that the German regime would come up with some sort of ad hoc rules for rebellion or these type of crimes against the new world order.
What about the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
That too, absolutely. The Japanese would have definitely pursued prosecution of Americans for that genocide. They would call it a genocide. I would say so.
In Germany and in France, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust, but it's legal in the US. So what do you think about it? Do you think it should be prohibited, or do you think it should be allowed to deny the Holocaust?
I believe in freedom of expression, so I think that the government should not be allowed to tell people what to think. The information is out there, and I think every individual should be able to read and inform themselves and decide if it happened or not. So I think a law prohibiting denying the Holocaust goes against freedom of expression, and so I think it's unnecessary. When you have freedom of expression, you don't need this type of laws.
Do you think that a trial was a good decision after the war? Do you think it was a good decision, or do you think that they have been shot, or that, I don't know. Do you think it was the good decision to give them a
I think-
defense and everything, all those rights, due process rights, or yeah?
I think it was a very like a civilized option to deal with this situation. You know, you have won a war, you have all these people that in turn killed or ordered to kill many others. You have families, you have plenty of individuals' lives that have been destroyed that want some type of restitution. And I think it was reasonable to have trials instead of just executing them like Stalin wanted.
Do you agree with the death penalty?
Where? Everywhere in the world?
Generally, do you think that there should be a death penalty?
No, anywhere.
Why?
I think the state doesn't have that right to decide who gets to live or die.
Do you also think that it should not have been applied in the Nuremberg trials because they were sentenced to death, some of the defendants? Do you think that there could have been an exception, that there are crimes which you deserve to die for? Do you think even in this case no one should have been sentenced to death?
It's a very complicated question. It's difficult to say because you have a balance, but I would say that even in this occasion, the state shouldn't have this right to decide who gets to live and who gets to die. The state should not play to be God.
Have you heard about the Eichmann trial?
I think so, yes. In
Yeah.
Israel?
Yeah, exactly. So he was one of the high-ranking Nazi officials being responsible for the logistics of the Holocaust, and he was tried in Israel. And in this trial, they had a lot of witnesses from concentration camps, a lot of testimony, a lot of personal stories, which was sometimes not even related to his charges because they wanted to draw the broader picture of the Holocaust. But in the Nuremberg trials, they had a lot of documentary entry. So in the Eichmann trial, they had more witnesses, but in the Nuremberg trial, they had more documentary evidence, and it was very objective, no personal part of that. So what do you think were the advantages and disadvantages, and what do you prefer? Do you think it was better to have a lot of witnesses to paint the broader picture of the Holocaust and to get an impression of what actually happened, or to just rely on the documents and have no witnesses at all? What do you think is better?
I think it depends on the rules of evidence. Worldwide, not worldwide, but certain legal traditions say that evidence should not be overwhelming, and there should be a balance. And so I guess that it's not a matter of what type of evidence you require more. If testimonies or documents, I would say that the courts have the authority to define when it's enough to have a certain amount of testimonies or certain amount of documents.
But do you think it was maybe warranted to have these testimonies, even though they're not related to the guilt of the defendant, in this specific instance, to give a broader impression of the Holocaust? Do you think it's legitimate for the purposes of remembering history, or do you think that it should only be tailored to the guilt of the defendant?
I think it's illegitimate because they are prosecuting someone, an individual. So it's not fair that they're bringing unrelated testimony to his conduct. So it's unfair actually against this individual if we want to respect due procedure.
How strong is patriotism in your country, in Colombia?
It's quite strong. Like there are certain aspects that unite us as a nation with an identity. But I would say it's not like too passionate or too fervent. We're proud of being Colombians, but not to like an extreme position.
Do you think that those catastrophes like the Nazi Germany, how it escalated, do you think that this had an impact on patriotism in other countries? That people were maybe more careful, or that they were less patriotic? Or do you think it had no impact on other countries at all?
From my knowledge of Germany and Germans, I have noticed that that actually nationalism in Germany is looked as something bad. And I understand for historic reasons. It's a sensitive topic there. But for example, you look at the US where everybody is really proud to be American. And I think this Second World War boosted this credibility on American values and American culture. So maybe this war boosted some nationalism in certain countries and then reduced the spirit of nationalism in others.
And nowadays, in many countries, there are new nationalist movements. A lot of people are becoming more patriotic. Do you think that those very extreme national movements might be comparable to the rise of National Socialism in Germany? Do you see parallels somewhere?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. For example, in Venezuela, in Latin America, Hugo Chavez was elected democratically, like Hitler was. And he eventually changed the rules and became a dictator. Now he's dead, but now his successor is the new dictator. And now in Europe, you see this rise of nationalist parties in countries like France, in Great Britain, the conservatives. I wouldn't say extreme nationalists in Britain, but it's of concern. This sudden rise of nationalism. I think it's an effect of economics, world economics. So I think there's a connection between economics and the increase of nationalism in countries, because nationalism is a powerful tool for politicians, and they can use it to unite people, create enemies that don't exist, and use that for their own agenda or purposes. And when the economy is doing not so good, they tend to use this tool.
Do you think that something like the Holocaust could happen again today, or something similar, like a mass persecution of people and everyone joining in?
I think not at the same scale, because of internet and how connected the world is right now. It's very difficult to hide something as massive as the Holocaust nowadays from the media. People can broadcast from Facebook wherever you are, or YouTube, anything, everywhere in the world. So I think it would be hard to go unnoticed. If it would never happen again, who knows?
Okay.
J'ai 85 ans, donc j'avais 13 ans à la fin de la guerre, et nous étions dans les Alpes de Haute-Provence.
D'accord. Et donc, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé à la fin de la guerre? Enfin, est-ce que tu peux m'expliquer un peu comment tout le monde a réagi, tout ça?
Eh bien, à la fin de la guerre, c'est les Américains qui dirigeaient les forces alliées occidentales. Donc, c'est eux qui ont pris la majeure partie de l'Allemagne, et c'est eux qui ont capturé la plupart des dirigeants nazis. Et c'est eux qui ont trouvé les premiers camps de concentration, camps d'extermination, Auschwitz et Dachau.
Et donc, est-ce que tu sais ce que sont les procès de Nuremberg?
Le procès de Nuremberg a été instauré en 1945-46 à l'instigation des États-Unis pour essayer de faire condamner les hauts responsables nazis de la Shoah.
Et t'as appris ça comment? À travers les journaux, à travers la presse, vu que t'étais petit?
Ben à l'époque, tout le monde en parlait, les journaux, la radio, quoi. Il n'y avait pas encore la télévision, mais...
Et tu penses que les procès étaient justes? Que c'était une bonne chose?
Ben, s'il n'y avait pas eu de procès, quoi, ça aurait été considéré comme une vengeance militaire pure et simple, alors que le fait d'avoir eu un procès a permis d'essayer de dégager la responsabilité des principaux dirigeants nazis. Et une des raisons qui laissent à penser que le procès a quand même été assez équitable, c'est qu'il y a eu des condamnations à mort, il y a eu des condamnations à la prison à vie, et il y a eu quelques graciés.
Donc, tu penses pas qu'ils auraient tous dû être condamnés à mort?
Peut-être pas, parce que les responsabilités de chacun étaient assez différentes.
Et tu penses quoi du fait de leur argument qu'ils obéissaient les lois de leur pays?
Mais c'est vrai qu'il était difficile de résister à des ordres, même quand on était contre ces ordres-là, parce qu'en cas de refus d'obéissance, on était purement et simplement exécuté comme ça se passait au moment de la guerre.
Et parce qu'en France, là maintenant, il n'y a plus le droit. La peine de mort, c'est interdit en France maintenant.
Oui, mais à l'époque, ça n'était pas encore le cas. C'est relativement récent, ça ne date que des années 80.
Et donc, vu que c'était pas possible de persécuter les chefs du parti nazi, jusqu'où est-ce qu'on aurait dû aller avec les persécutions? Est-ce que, par exemple, on aurait dû condamner celui qui était en charge d'ouvrir les chambres de gaz et celui qui conduisait les trains en camp de concentration? Comment est-ce qu'on fixe la limite?
La limite, c'était essentiellement ceux qui donnaient les ordres plutôt que ceux qui obéissaient.
Non. Ouais. Et qu'est-ce que tu penses du fait que c'était un crime, que c'est toujours un crime en France d'ailleurs et en Allemagne de nier l'Holocauste?
Je pense que c'est un crime dans la mesure où c'est quelque chose d'assez abominable et qu'il est impossible de nier l'existence des chambres à gaz et des camps de concentration dans la mesure où on a gardé les ruines de ces camps de concentration. Donc on argumente sur le nombre des gens qui sont passés peut-être, mais on ne peut pas nier leur existence qui est parfaitement avérée.
Et tu penses pas que c'est une forme d'atteinte à la liberté d'expression?
La liberté d'expression, dans la mesure où c'est nier l'évidence, c'est plus une liberté d'expression, quoi. On n'empêche pas les gens de faire des études, on dit qu'il est stupide de nier quelque chose dont les preuves sont acquises.
Et donc, qu'est-ce que tu penses sont les avantages ou désavantages de cette loi?
Je pense qu'elle a quand même servi à faire prendre conscience à la plupart des gens de ce qui existait réellement, parce que ça a duré quand même pendant des mois et qu'il était difficile de le nier complètement. Parce qu'on a dit aussi que nous avions à la Fousse un juif polonais qui a fait l'Allemagne à Vienne et qui ignorait complètement l'existence des camps de concentration. On savait que les juifs et certains résistants avaient été déportés. On pensait que c'était simplement pour les faire travailler dans des conditions certainement difficiles, mais on ne savait pas que c'était pour les éliminer de façon systématique.
Et donc, est-ce que tu penses que la France est un pays plutôt patriotique?
La France est un pays patriotique, mais ce n'est pas tellement le patriotisme qui est en cause, c'est le nationalisme. Être patriote, défendre son pays, c'est tout à fait compréhensible. Le nationalisme, c'est souvent dire qu'on est supérieur aux autres, ce qui amène souvent des guerres assez dangereuses.
Et tu penses qu'il y a eu une augmentation de patriotisme, de nationalisme avec Marine Le Pen?
Oui, je pense aussi, parce que surtout, pas tellement avec Marine Le Pen, mais surtout avec son père, qui a été défenseur de l'OAS, qui étaient ceux qui étaient contre De Gaulle au moment de la libération de l'Algérie. Et il est assez insupportable de voir aujourd'hui le Front National dire qu'il est gaulliste, alors que le père de Marine Le Pen était partisan de l'OAS qui a attaqué De Gaulle à coups de fusil au Petit Clamart.
Donc, est-ce que tu penses que si les États-Unis, si l'Allemagne et le Japon avaient gagné, est-ce que les États-Unis auraient été persécutés pour avoir lâché les bombes atomiques sur le Japon?
C'est possible, mais ça me paraît une hypothèse très contestable. Parce que si l'Allemagne avait gagné, c'est qu'elle aurait eu la bombe atomique, et c'est aussi que si elle avait eu la bombe atomique, elle l'aurait certainement utilisée. Donc je pense qu'elle n'aurait pas fait un procès aux États-Unis. Ça aurait été, et si tous les deux avaient eu la bombe atomique, ça aurait été un carnage des deux côtés.
Et tu penses que la seule manière de terminer la guerre, ça aurait été avec les bombes atomiques?
C'était pas la seule manière de terminer la guerre, mais c'était la plus rapide. Je me souviens que la première bombe atomique était tombée le jour de mon anniversaire, le 6 août, et que pour tout le monde, ça a été un énorme soulagement, parce qu'on avait l'impression que la guerre dans le Pacifique pouvait encore durer des mois ou des années, et qu'on commençait à être très fatigué de cette guerre qui durait depuis 5 ans.
Donc là, quand vous avez entendu ces nouvelles, c'était quasiment sûr que la guerre allait terminer?
Oui, avec les deux bombes atomiques, il paraissait absolument impossible pour le Japon de continuer la guerre, sinon on risque d'être complètement anéanti.
Ouais. Et qu'est-ce que tu penses sont les conséquences de ce procès de Nuremberg pour l'Allemagne et même sur un plan international? Qu'est-ce que ça nous a apporté?
Je pense que ça a permis d'éclairer quand même de façon assez objective et complète ce qui s'était réellement passé en Allemagne, ce qui n'était pas le cas. Nous ne savions pas exactement ce qui s'était passé. Il est vraisemblable que beaucoup d'Allemands eux-mêmes ne le savaient pas.
Et donc à travers les procès, ça a aidé à découvrir?
À mettre en évidence la vérité historique de ce qui s'était passé.
Donc ça, tu penses que ça a apporté plus ça que le fait d'emmener les nazis, les criminels en justice? C'est plus important de montrer...
Oui, si on les avait exécutés directement sans procès, ça aurait certainement eu une valeur pédagogique inférieure. Ça aurait paru plutôt une vengeance qu'une justice.
Mais tu pensais pas qu'il aurait peut-être mérité?
Oui, peut-être, mais est-ce que le problème, c'est pas tellement d'exécuter les gens, mais d'essayer d'éviter que ça recommence une nouvelle fois.
Donc c'était plus pour éviter que ça recommence alors.
Par contre, ce qui paraît à la suite de ce procès assez peu compréhensible, c'est que les États-Unis aujourd'hui ne reconnaissent pas le tribunal international de La Haye, qui est fait pour juger des choses analogues.
Et pourquoi tu penses qu'ils ne reconnaissent pas ce tribunal?
Parce qu'ils ne veulent pas que leurs ressortissants dépendent d'autre chose que d'un tribunal américain. Donc c'est un peu suspect.
Ouais, c'est un peu hypocrite aussi peut-être, non?
Voilà.
Et puis après, tu penses quoi? Enfin, les conséquences pour les Allemands aussi de ce tribunal, de ces procès en long terme?
Je pense que ça a permis aux Allemands qui n'étaient pas vraiment nazis, d'accepter plus facilement leur passé. En montrant qu'ils avaient été embarqués dans une opération auquel il était obligé de suivre sans être parfaitement convaincu d'avoir raison. En France, on cite le cas des Alsaciens qui avaient été embauchés dans l'armée allemande contre leur gré et qui étaient quand même obligés, sous peine d'être exécutés, d'obéir aux ordres de l'armée allemande.
Ouais. Et donc, est-ce que tu penses que depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale et ces procès, il n'y a pas un autre cas ou d'autres guerres ou conflits où ça aurait pu se reproduire, ces procès?
Mais il y a d'autres candidats, en particulier là dernièrement, il y a l'ancien président du Tchad, Hissène Habré, qui a été condamné par une cour pénale internationale à Dakar, à la prison à vie. Mais c'est pas toujours facile dans des pays comme africains d'avoir des preuves. Il y a actuellement en cours à La Haye l'ancien président de la Côte d'Ivoire. Et le procès dure depuis 3 ans sans qu'on sache exactement ce qui se dit. C'est donc il doit être assez souvent difficile d'avoir des preuves. Bien souvent, il y a eu des exactions, souvent des deux côtés. Et quand on cherche à faire la responsabilité d'un seul côté, c'est toujours assez difficile à démontrer.
Ouais. Tu penses qu'avec le climat politique d'aujourd'hui, les procès nous ont plutôt évité une autre guerre mondiale, ou tu penses que c'est inévitable, que les gens maintenant ont oublié que...
Je pense que ça a été utile, mais la mémoire des gens est en général assez courte et il y a beaucoup de gens qui commencent à un peu oublier le passé.
Donc il y a des risques que...
Et il y a des risques que ça revienne un peu partout.
Et donc après, juste une question un peu plus philosophique, mais qui est-ce que tu penses a tué le plus de gens? Le juge ici aux États-Unis qui a donné le droit à l'avortement, ou alors Adolf Eichmann?
Pour moi, il n'y a aucun doute, quoi. Eichmann a été condamné pour des raisons évidentes. Et le droit à l'avortement est quelque chose d'entièrement différent, puisqu'en général, on essaie d'éviter des choses assez horribles, soit d'avoir des enfants handicapés, soit des victimes de femmes qui ont été violées.
Et oui, parce qu'en fait, leur argument aussi pour choisir les juifs, c'est de dire qu'ils ne les considéraient pas comme des personnes. Et tu penses pas comment est-ce que tu penses qu'ils peuvent le différencier, ou pourquoi est-ce qu'ils ont... pourquoi les juifs sont des personnes et puis un autre groupe, comme... je sais pas, pourrait pas être considéré comme ça?
Par l'étude de génétique actuelle, on s'aperçoit que tous les êtres vivants ont beaucoup de points communs. Ce qu'il y avait de plus invraisemblable dans la situation des juifs, c'est que qu'est-ce qu'un juif? C'est déjà difficile à définir. Les nazis le définissaient en disant tous ceux qui peuvent prouver que leurs 4 grands-parents, paternels et maternels, aucun n'était juif. Et l'ironie de l'histoire, c'est que Hitler n'aurait pas pu répondre à cette définition. Donc Hitler avait peut-être un grand-père juif. Ouais. Parce qu'il y en avait dont personne ne savait exactement qui c'était. Donc, il faut se référer aux définitions, quoi.
C'est un peu arbitraire aussi, quand même.
C'est un peu arbitraire, mais c'est un peu moins arbitraire que de définir une race autre chose que par ses gènes. Et l'humanité a été... ce qu'on pense aujourd'hui, c'est que nous sommes tous descendants de très peu d'hommes, une centaine de milliers au total, ce qui explique que nous sommes très voisins. Et il n'y a plus de différence entre des tribus africaines entre elles, parce que la race humaine est en Afrique depuis le plus longtemps, donc c'est là qu'il y a les différences les plus graves. Mais entre un Chinois et un Européen, il y a finalement très peu de différences génétiques.
Ouais. Bon. Donc juste pour terminer, pour toi, les procès c'était une bonne chose, même si c'est les Américains qui ont un peu tout organisé, les Alliés plutôt, mais en réalité c'était les Américains, quoi, non?
C'était essentiel, c'était l'ensemble des Alliés, mais sous direction américaine.
Ouais. Donc ça, tu penses que c'était la bonne façon de le faire?
Oui, je pense que c'était la bonne façon de faire, encore que tout peut être éventuellement critiqué, rien n'est parfait.
Ouais. Ok.